Welcome to the World Physiotherapy Education Task Force webinar series. This is the third webinar, Digital Solutions for Online Learning. My name is Djenana Jalovcic, and I'm World Physiotherapy Education Professional Advisor, and I'm also an Associate Professor and Coordinator of Online Masters in Healthy Aging and Rehabilitation at Western Norway University of Applied Sciences. Today, together with Rachael Lowe, who is the president of Physiopedia Charity and CEO of Physio Plus and co-founder of both, we will be moderating this session. First, just a few words about the Education Task Force. The aim of the Education Task Force is to consider the impact, consequences, and responses to COVID-19 in physiotherapist entry-level education, with short-term, medium-term, and long-term horizons in mind. It is also to map and share educational practices and resources in responding to current crises. We are also considering questions and opportunities for collaborative scholarship and thought leadership. So we have designed this webinar series for World Physiotherapy member organizations, physiotherapists, educators, regulators, students, physiotherapists, and clinical educators. Welcome to you all. Before we start today, here are some housekeeping items. Microphones and cameras of all attendees are automatically turned off. For questions, please use Q&A button. And we will be monitoring question and answers, and you will have the chance to get your answers in the Q&A moderated session after all three speakers finish their presentations. The chat is also open, and we will be monitoring chat, but we would like to encourage you to use Q&A for questions to panelists. If you want to ask a specific panelist, please enter the name at the beginning of the question. And if your question is to all panelists, then we will be taking it without directing the question to a specific panelist. If you experience any problems during the webinar, please email us to info@worldphysio. So those are short housekeeping items, and let's move to the topic. COVID has forced educators to embrace technology in a very short period of time. For some, this transition to emergency online teaching was a journey to an uncharted territory, while others have been experienced in using digital tools in solutions in physiotherapist entry-level education. Although there isn't much evidence about online learning in physiotherapy education, decades of educational research and abundance of evidence is generated about online learning could be useful for physiotherapist educators, including that there is no significant difference between learning outcomes between online and classroom instructions. The accepted position is that online learning is as effective as any other category of on-campus instruction. The key to success is design, development, and delivery of instructions, and not technology or geography or time. So I would like to ask Rachael to launch the poll and see who are in the audience. So please answer the poll questions to see where our audience is coming from. In this webinar, we do have three distinguished panelists who will be talking about their experiences of online learning during the pandemic. As the numbers are coming in, I can see that almost 60% of people voted, and the biggest number of participants are coming from Europe, followed by Asia, Western Pacific, Africa, North America, and South Africa. So another question that we ask you is how your educational institution is running the program, and still it is between the biggest number of institutions are either fully online or a combination of online and on-campus education. Can we just end the poll and show those results? Thank you so much for everyone for answering. And now it's time to move to our first panelist. Our first speaker is Professor Marco Pang, who is currently professor of the Department of Rehabilitation Science at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. His research is mainly focused on stroke rehabilitation. He has produced more than 120 journal articles and over 180 conference papers. His publications are highly cited and appear in various premier journals. He's currently the editor-in-chief of Hong Kong Physiotherapy Journal, associate editor of Physiotherapy Canada, and also the president of Hong Kong Physiotherapy Association. He served in executive board of World Physiotherapy in 2017 to 2019. Professor Pang is a popular speaker and educator, and for his research and teaching excellence, he has been awarded numerous awards by University of Alberta and Hong Kong Polytechnic University. We are delighted to have you with us today, Marco. So over to you.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction, and I would like to thank the World Physiotherapy for inviting me. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you'll be able to see my PowerPoint presentation. So I'm happy to have this opportunity to share with you how COVID-19 pandemic has affected the delivery of teaching in our physiotherapy program. There are several aspects of online teaching that I want to cover in this, short seminar. And so actually in our university, since January 2020, all face-to-face lectures or seminars have been changed to the online format. And to do that, we need an online learning platform. And what we use is the Blackboard online learning platform. And you can see on the screen here on the right-hand side, all the courses are listed here, and the students have access to all the teaching materials in there. And now when we deliver the lectures and seminars online, we use within the Blackboard online learning platform a specific function called Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. And so the sessions can be recorded so that the students can review them at a different time. And you can see this is a screen capture of the Blackboard Collaborate Ultra chat room. And when I deliver, as I'm delivering the online lecture or seminar, the students can actually see me doing that. You can see here in the bottom left corner, the students can actually see me delivering the seminar live. And also on the right-hand side of the screen, the students can actually type in their messages and questions, and so that I could answer the questions live during the session. And there's another option within the system. In addition to the Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, one can actually use the Zoom function to deliver online teaching. So we have two options within our system. In terms of remote access to resources, we give the students remote access to library resources. And also we give students remote access to specialized software programs, such as the SPSS software for statistical analysis. And for example, I teach the research methods course, and we have several labs in our original curriculum in which we teach our students different types of statistical analysis in the form of a computer lab session. But with the COVID-19 pandemic, we changed the format to delivering everything online. So we have the SPSS software program ourselves, of course, but the students don't have that same program installed in the computer. So using our system, we give the students remote access to this specialized software program, so that as we're delivering the session live, the students can actually use the software program to run the analysis with us. So that's a very nice thing to have. So in addition to the live sessions, we also have pre-recorded sessions, okay? And so using the same Blackboard, Collaborate Ultra, we could pre-record our lectures and seminars and so on. But in order to give the students incentive to go through the pre-recorded materials, I think it's important for us to have online tasks or online quizzes for the students to complete. This is, to give the students incentive or encouragement to review the online material. So you can see here, this is one of the courses that I teach. So with each pre-recorded session, we have a specific task for them to do within a designated period of time, so that they follow their self-study schedule and to make sure they're not lagging behind. So we need to redesign the course somewhat. And what about the essential face-to-face sessions? And I think for entry-level physiotherapy education, the practical sessions or the hands-on sessions are very important. And these so-called essential face-to-face sessions were actually suspended during our worst pandemic period. And so to deal with that, we use the online system, and some of the hands-on skills were videotaped and put online for the students viewing. So now we're able to resume the practical sessions, and but we strictly follow the infection control guidelines. I mean, no more than 50 persons at any time in one teaching room. So the students have to wear masks at all times. They have to clean their hands before entering the lab. And we have mandatory body temperature check. So we follow all these different guidelines for the practical sessions now. What about the feedback from the students, with all these different online learning experience? And actually, I found that students are more willing to raise or answer questions during the live sessions compared with the face-to-face sessions. And this is a very interesting phenomenon. And what I found was, the students, during the live sessions in previous years, they were afraid to raise questions, or they're afraid to answer questions because they're afraid to make mistakes in front of other people. They would look bad. And with the online sessions, they become sort of invisible. So they just use the chat function in the chat room and type their questions. So they are more willing to do that when we have the online sessions. I found something very interesting. But the disadvantages are, we have the technical issues. Some students, their network is kind of unstable. But when the results came out, we found that the overall grade distribution is not significantly different from previous years. So we're able to achieve the same intended learning outcomes. So that's quite nice. Next, we have the clinical placements. This is another major issue. And in Hong Kong, the typical student-supervisor ratio is 6:1, meaning 6 students are supervised by 1 clinical educator in a single clinical placement. And during our worst pandemic period, and which is listed here, the clinical placements were actually suspended. And so nothing happened during those periods. But the thing is, as the pandemic continued, we saw no end. And it was decided that the clinical placements cannot be suspended forever. So we came up with alternative solutions. And the solution that we came up with was for a certain period of time, okay? We used a blended or hybrid mode of clinical placement, okay? And what that means is, we actually spent 4 to 5 weeks using this particular mode. And during this period, the clinical supervisor engaged the students in real patient case discussion using the online platform, Zoom. And based on our record, each day, each placement day, there were 3 to 5 patient cases being discussed per day. And as I said, the students spend 4 to 5 weeks using this particular mode of clinical placement. And this is spread across each of the 2 5-week placement blocks. So you can say roughly 40% of the placement time in a particular block is spent in this real case discussion online mode. And what about the content of this case discussion? It involves like interpretation of assessment findings, treatment planning, and clinical decision making, something that we would typically do during our face-to-face clinical placement block. Okay, nothing is really different, but the case discussion is really intense for those 5 weeks because nothing happens on site, everything is done online. The students may be given homework to prepare for case discussion, and we develop separate rubrics for assessment of performance in case discussion. Feedback from clinical educators. In fact, the clinical educators found that more in-depth case discussion actually took place in, when using this hybrid mode compared with, the conventional face-to-face placements, because in the face-to-face placements, typically, the students would engage in direct patient care, documentation, and case discussion, all mixed, when you look at the workload of a single day. But now in those 5 weeks, each day they engage in just patient case discussion. So it allows for more in-depth case discussion. But the disadvantages are, there's a lot of preparation work on compiling the patient information, and they took painstaking effort in removing the information that can potentially reveal the patient's identity. And this is a very important issue because everything is put online. Students can view the information online. So we want to make sure that anything that might reveal the patient's identity be removed. And again, same technical problems. If the network is unstable, it leads to problems here. What about the feedback from the students? We obtain information from the students regarding their feedback on the preparation work of the university, their own interpretation and participation, the content of the clinical placement, the quality of teaching by the clinical supervisor, and the perceived learning outcomes. And based on our results, the survey, the results are overall very positive, okay, despite the changes that we made. So to conclude my presentation, yes, there were major challenges to the delivery of teaching in both the classroom settings as well as in the clinical settings, as we were suddenly faced with the COVID-19 pandemic. And we used, yes, digital solutions to tackle the challenges, but I think based on our experience, we need to acknowledge the strengths as well as the limitations of online learning. And we did encounter some problems with the things that I've talked about, okay? And I would like to thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco. And while our second speaker is preparing to share her screen, I will just tell you a couple of words about Nihad. Nihad is currently a professor of pediatric physiotherapy at the University of Jordan. Professor Almasri is the former Dean of School of Rehabilitation Sciences at the University of Jordan. Her clinical and research interests include public health, pediatric rehab, evaluation of medical and rehabilitation services. She has many publications in peer-reviewed journals and received many international awards in recognition of her research and expertise. She has also worked as a consultant for World Physiotherapy, World Health Organization, evaluating service delivery systems and entry-level physiotherapist education programs, both internationally and nationally. She also participated in the accreditation of entry-level programs in physiotherapy in low and middle-income countries, as well as to develop competency frameworks for rehabilitation and physiotherapy professions. So I can see that Nihad is ready, so over to you, Nihad.
Thank you so much, Djenana, and hello everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. It's really an honor to be here and participate in this webinar. Thank you for the Education Task Force of the World Physiotherapy for this nice opportunity. From my experience in the past, let's say past year almost, in applying some digital solutions for our online education, I would like to share some insight. So to give you some, let me see if okay. So a little bit about University of Jordan, where I work. We start to have a bachelor degree in physiotherapy back in '99. And the first master's program was newly developed in 2018. In Jordan, it's a small country. We're 10 million people, but we have currently 5 universities, 3 public and 2 private, that offer different types of physical therapy programs. And the Jordanian Physiotherapy Society is our representative body since 1981 in the world physiotherapy. The idea of online education is not new to the University of Jordan. We started back in 2006, but we only used the Blackboard platform at that time just to share our lectures. So instead of handing the students papers and giving them paperwork, now we use the Blackboard at that time, and it was a media to send the material for education. Yet, the concept of blended learning was introduced in 2016, and we had legislations at the level of the university trying to advocate for the importance of blending both online as well as face-to-face education. But we had to go completely online last March 2020 due to COVID-19 pandemic, as the rest of the world. At least for the courses I've taught, which is pediatrics, as well as some of the graduate courses, I did all the work online, while other colleagues who were handling the clinical courses, they went through blended learning and they did part online and part face-to-face. So as for me, I have found like there's some barriers for online education at different levels. So for the university, when we had to go completely online, we didn't have any bylaws or legislations to organize and monitor the whole process. So that was a challenge that the university had to deal with at that time. We had different platforms such as the Moodle, the Blackboard, but we were using mixture of them, not a single platform that is ready for everyone to use. We needed a lot of technical support through our IT center, and we had problems as others with the internet and the servers. As professors, we did not have very high technical experience on delivering online education. We needed both IT support as well as pedagogical support in our teaching methodology and examination and preparation for the online material. Working from home was another challenge, and I think it's for everyone. And we as well had to face the internet and computer and the lack of online teaching material that is ready to use. For our students, similar issues as well, but for them, mainly it's the lack of face-to-face communication and keep them motivated. That was the main challenge for us. So some creative solutions that came through since that time. The university started to develop their bylaws and legislation. We had an open educational resource center that was nicely helping the educators for the online resources. We also had the quality assurance training courses through our quality assurance center, and those have done like a tremendous job in improving our capacities and our skills as educators to deliver quality educational material online. We had an open hotline with the IT center, even if when we were working from home. And the School of IT were nicely supporting other schools. The University of Jordan has 28 deanship. It's a huge comprehensive university. So imagine the amount of work that the university has to provide for that, to support this process. As for us, we started thinking, okay, we need online educational committee at the level of the department to help us. We need to search for online resources, and in limited resources countries, you know, free is the magical word. We start contacting the clinical sites and also asking them about, you know, the regulations. And we started to build our own resources library, which was nice. The students were amazing. They really volunteered in different clinical sites on their own, especially the 3rd, 4th year student. They would go to different places and practice and ask us for feedback. And they also helped us videotape on each other to use these videos in the courses. So for me, I experienced videos, discussion boards, I use social networks, I also looked for online open courses, different examination softwares, as well as augmented reality. Briefly, like videos were really important for me. And I had my own, but not to go completely online. So I found the International Clinical Educator Center to be really helpful. Even the fees you have to pay to access the videos for this center are not high for us, and we can tolerate it. And you can go on a trial for a couple of weeks to see if you can see the videos and benefit from them. The nice thing about the International Clinical Educators videos, they also had instructional guidelines on how to use the videos. So they are designed for education. They're not random videos that are from YouTube. So that was nice for me. In addition to the videos developed by our students, as well as the one we had through our textbooks as resources. I also use the discussion boards, especially at the University of Jordan, we use the Moodle. The Moodle was the main platform that we went for when we went completely online. So I had some graduate courses I taught for the master's students, and the discussion boards were a very important function. It really allowed the students to share their ideas on their own, and whenever they have time, reflect on each other. It's a very formal way that you can also use that to grade part of their participation. So discussion boards were really helpful. This is one of the discussion boards for my master's students. I also use the Facebook, and that's more for the undergraduate students. They like Facebook, it's casual for them, all their phones are connected to it, they like to go and discuss things. So what I've done is I try to post every week a clinical case and ask my student to interact related to that case. It was a closed group online, and the Facebook was a really nice way, but again, it's informal. It's different than the discussion board. I also use the WhatsApp group sometimes to schedule times for exams and meetings, and for the student to reach me if they need an urgent help. Now the online open courses, and as I said, I found really like Physiopedia provided a lot of good resources, online courses, different websites that you can access. But what I liked about some of the courses for Physiopedia is really the COVID-19 related courses. So we asked our students to go and they complete the course and get the certificate before they start their clinical course. And that was amazing resources for us. Now, the dilemma of examination and how to make our examination, as solid as we are used to. Students are doing exams from home. It's hard to observe all of them, the integrity of the exam, and so on and so on. So personally, I believe we need to start to think about our examination process in a different way. But what we did, basically, we used the Moodle quizzes for formal examinations where we have a set time and one-way questions and formal exams for the students. We also use the Microsoft Teams through the Microsoft Forms. And I personally use Socrative, which is an application that you can use with the phone. It's very nice for a dynamic classroom. The student can just log in and answer the questions. So for short quizzes, Socrative was really nice to use. I think it is time for us to start thinking of open book exams and using them and trying to measure, the competencies of clinical reasoning of the students. So whether they're doing this from the universities, if they perform the exam from the university or from home, we are sure that we are measuring their competencies and they're not getting help through different resources. Now, the university nicely allowed us a participation in a library where we had augmented reality resources, 3D dimensional models for better visualization. I think this is a good resource for basic sciences, anatomy, physiology, as well as some of the basic measurement courses. And I found it really helpful. The Moodle, as I told you, was the main the main form that we use. It offered all-in-one. So we had so many applications that was nice for us to use. We also went through the Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams for me is more flexible. You can video your lectures, you can post it later on, students easily access it, and so on. The university had posted in their website different resources for us, such as online learning guides. We also had the courses that are delivered by the quality assurance. And the nice resource that we use since long time, and we use it more now, is the students' evaluation. So this is an example, sorry, it's in Arabic, but it's an example of a student evaluation for one of my courses, the online course. And this course was completely delivered online in summer. I found it really nice because it gave me the chance to reflect on my experience, my students' experience, and try to fill the gap. So a message to everyone that we need to stop at certain point and evaluate this online experience in order to improve it. But
Nihad,
yeah, I'm done. Last slide. So what we need to do is really ensure whenever we pick an online learning material or resource, we have to check our internet connectivity, find compatible hardwares and softwares, choosing the technology that minimize workload on professors, but still effective and impactful for the student, keeping our softwares up to date, keeping our students engaged, encourage teamwork, and evaluate our experience. This is my simple checklist for you. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nihad. And thank you for sharing some excellent resources for everyone to be able to use. So now I would like to check with Michael. And if Michael, are you ready to share your slides? And while you're getting ready, just a few words about Michael. He's an associate professor in the Department of Physiotherapy at the University of Western Cape, South Africa. He conducts research into the use of digital technologies in the classroom and their influence on teacher and student relationship as a part of teaching and learning practice. His PhD evaluated the use of technology-mediated practices for clinical education and led to the development of design principles for blended learning environments in the health professions. His current research interests include the role of critical pedagogy in practice, as well as increasing potential of artificial intelligence in higher and professional education. He is an editor of Open Physio, an open access journal with a focus on physiotherapy education, which aims to challenge traditional assumptions about academic publication and research dissemination. He is also the co-founder of InVita, an international community of practice that aims to initiate conversations around the practice-based experiences of physiotherapy educators from around the world. So our last speaker today, Michael Rowe from South Africa. Michael.
Thanks, Djenana, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I really appreciate it. I'm going to take a somewhat different perspective and think about a slightly critical perspective on the use of technology in physiotherapy education, especially as it has been influenced by the lockdown and the global pandemic. And I'd like to highlight what I think are some of the potential problems that we may face moving forward as physiotherapy educators. So I think it's important to start with this idea of the default configuration that we take on when we move into a physical or digital space when we think about education of any kind. So if we think about a classroom typically has 4 walls. The rows of desks and chairs mean that students face in one direction. They usually face the teacher, who is the source of knowledge and specialized information, and the students are passive recipients. And so the default configuration of a physical classroom determines to a large extent what it is that you can do in that space. And the same is true of online learning environments. The configuration of the online learning environment determines to a large extent what students are able to do in that environment. And I think that as physiotherapy educators, we need to take critical positions about the kinds of technologies that we bring into our classrooms. I think it's really important to start with the kind of recognition that what we did was an overnight knee-jerk response to a global pandemic. This wasn't a theoretically informed, planned rollout of online and blended learning. And so I think that what we probably did is we reproduced the power dynamics that are represented in the physical classroom in the online space. And so what we end up seeing are, instead of using technology to expand and open up our teaching and learning processes, all that we've done is we've reproduced a situation where the dominant pedagogical process was was just implemented in a different space. And so for a lot of us who look at technology as representing some kind of hope for education as something very different, I think it's a little bit difficult to see that most of what we've seen has really just been a reproduction of what has gone before. We haven't used technology to open up teaching and learning practices. All that we've done is we've reproduced what we have been doing for the last 500 years. And you know, if you look at this illustration, which is about 500 years old, this is what a classroom has looked like for the last 500 years. So, you know, at that time, it made a lot of sense to aggregate expertise and content in one place, because there may only have been one book on that topic in your country, maybe in your continent. And so it made a lot of sense to get everyone into one physical place where somebody could read from that book to them. But we no longer have that situation where we have a scarcity of information. And so the idea that we need to aggregate content into a place like a learning management system or a classroom seems a little bit anathema to what is possible when we think about what we can do with technology. And I think that all that we've seen in the last few months is the use of technology to reproduce this 500-year-old painting. If we look at the learning management system that is used by everyone, and you know, I think to a large extent we had no other option. This isn't a decision that you know, 90% of the physiotherapy educators in the world did not want this. And so the move to the learning management system was inevitable. But we really need to understand that a learning management system has the teacher and the content at the center, not the student. And if we are going to take seriously the idea that the optimal configuration of online learning is one that is centered on the student, then we need to think very carefully about the specific technologies that we use in physiotherapy education. And I think that the learning management system, while it may have served us relatively well over the last few months because we didn't have many other options, I think that if we privilege this platform as the platform that we're going to use for moving forward with online and blended physiotherapy education, I think we're going to do ourselves and our students a major disservice. We know that a lot of people are using things like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and a lot of Google products in their teaching and learning. And to a large extent, this is probably a good thing because those tools tend to allow more diversity of practice than something like a learning management system. But we need to always remember that Facebook is not making any decisions to improve the learning of your students. Facebook has a fiduciary responsibility to return a profit to their shareholders. And that is the decision that guides all other decisions made at Facebook and Google and Microsoft. And if it happens that their, what's the word? If it so happens that your needs are momentarily aligned with decisions that they've made, I think that that's fine. But it's really important to understand that they have their own set of values and their set of values are not always necessarily aligned with student learning needs and the kinds of outcomes that we care about in physiotherapy education. One of the things that I think is really important is that every decision that we make about educational technology sends a message to our students. And one of the things that I see a lot of people talking about at the moment is how do we control assessment? And so there are a lot of people talking about software that needs to be installed on students' computers so that we can ensure that they aren't cheating in their exams. And I think we need to be really careful about this because it seems strange that we're starting from a premise that our students are liars and cheats. And if this is the way that we're thinking about students who are going to be graduating soon and moving out into the world to treat patients independently, and our main concern is how do we stop them from cheating, I think that says a lot about our own values and intentions. And I think we need to be very careful about the kinds of technologies that we talk about integrating into our programs. Because once they're in, it's going to be very difficult to get these things out. And so if you're considering bringing in proctoring software to surveil your students in their homes, then, you know, once you've made that decision, it's going to be very difficult to move it out. And I think we're going to be stuck with some of these decisions for the next 20, 30, you know, maybe 50 years. And I don't think that that's an exaggeration. So the decisions that we make today, I think, are going to have very long-term consequences that we need to think about very carefully. So again, this idea that the choices we make are ideological. Every decision we make in education has a political consequence. And I think that we need to make decisions that are going to open up our options for configuration of the learning environment rather than close them down. And I think if you find yourself changing your teaching practice to align with the options, the default options that are available in some of these tools, then I think that there's a problem. So I think, in my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think that the options that we have now with digital tools create opportunities for us to reconfigure how power works in the classroom. And so I think that we can, you know, rather than closing down students' learning opportunities, which I think a lot of educational technology does, I think we can use digital technology to open up the opportunities that are available for students. And so we can change how power works in the classroom by giving students more opportunities to change the pathways to learning outcomes. So they don't have to necessarily follow the exact things that the lecturer tells them to do. They might choose different pathways with different tools. And I think it's incumbent on us to provide them with opportunities to do so. Another really powerful framework is the idea of critical pedagogy. And so to use online tools as a way to provide opportunities for students to learn from the world, to bring the world into the classroom, to bring their own experiences into the classroom and into the online learning environment. And through that, to try and change the world. So online learning can bring students learning interactions out into the public space. And while this does have the potential to maybe embarrass in the best case scenario, but potentially also you know, get people into trouble, I think that we need to teach students how to successfully navigate that online public learning environment rather than to try and protect them from it. Because once they graduate, then there's no one there holding their hands or looking over their shoulder, telling them what they are and aren't allowed to do. So I think if we better prepare students to act in the world using digital tools, then I think that could be potentially quite powerful. I know that my time is coming up, so I'll very briefly go through this. Stephen Downes has said that the principles of an open network learning environment are autonomy, so the opportunity to make your own choices about the directions that you can take through the learning environment, diversity of opinion, so rather than just having the lecturer's voice as the only perspective coming into the curriculum, to have diversity of opinion. We can have an openness where students' learning can be informed by the outside world and then also influence the outside world, and interaction with each other. So to move away from the idea that learning is an independent act and that it is rather a social interaction. And just very quickly, I won't go into this in any detail because I know I'm a bit over time, but I think if you look for this crisis response measure from the Royal Society of Arts, it's a very, very useful framework to decide how to make decisions about the technology that you may have brought into your learning environments. Yeah, so thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Hi there, everybody. Michael, Marco, Nihad, thank you so much. You've brought some amazing experiences and perspectives to our transformation to online learning and teaching recently. I have been receiving some questions here, so I have a few questions for each of you and then some general questions. I realize we only have 10 minutes to go through questions. I'm just going to come to you, Michael, first of all, as you were just speaking. We had a question for you about using video for practical skills. So now the majority of teaching is online. Can a video impart the practical skills compared to hands-on teaching?
I think that there's some reasonably good quality publications that have come out recently over the last few years, demonstrating that the learning outcomes with video-based practical training are not significantly different from face-to-face. In many ways, using video for practical training gets us past a lot of the barriers to learning that we experience in the classroom. If you think about 60 students crowded around a plinth while someone demonstrates a technique at the neck and you're standing 3 lines back at the feet, you know, that's not a great learning experience for you. And so I think that we can use video to enhance the training, practical skills training, but I don't think that, no one is suggesting that online and video takes over from classroom-based training, but we can use the one to get through the barriers that the other one provides.
Thank you, Michael. And I kind of, in relation to using video, so if we come on to talk about using video, and this has come up in a couple of questions that have been submitted, and also both Marco and Nihad, you all talked about this really, but when it comes to some of the weaknesses of using technology for online education, we often talk about digital competence and the level of access to internet that everyone has. So I'd just like to put to whoever would like to answer, what kind of solutions have you found for overcoming the digital competence question for both students and educators?
So if I may, as for the students, actually, it's the way you teach a child doing something. They have to do it, and you know, the more they do it, the better they get at it. So what we did when we started the pandemic, when we had to go all of a sudden unprepared online, we were just spending more time with the students. So we held like a practice training session online for the exam. So to prepare them how to handle the, technology, how to get in out of the software and do things, and how to submit their exams. And that's one of the reasons I've used the WhatsApp groups as well, because students feel more comfortable just texting, asking, how can I do that? How can I upload this? Where is this resource? So it's, and knowing they also have to do some on their own, like they have to go if it's a weakness point for them. So again, they have plenty of videos online that can help them improve their digital competencies. As for the educators, I found the Quality Assurance Center courses for us really helpful. And it's all recorded. So we have a library where we can go and just check if we need to see how can we develop exam on Moodle or something like that. So that's how we handled this in Jordan.
Great, thank you, Nihad, for sharing that. Marco, I also saw that you had something to say for this question.
I think the students are very competent. I think more than us. And for our staff, a lot of us were using very traditional way of teaching, like face-to-face, the mass lectures and things like that. But before all of these were implemented, we actually, some of our staff had to go through like special training seminars offered by the university, of how to redesign our courses if it's going to be online, and the technology aspect and all that. So yeah, it took some effort to make this happen.
Yeah, so maybe it seems like it's more education for the educators and the students. But I guess when it comes to technology, what about where there is poor internet and we actually struggle to access the online technology? Then it's not a question of competence, it's a question of access. So has anyone any specific solutions in this scenario?
We have a big, I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you. So in South Africa, we have a lot of students who, they live in places where there's no cell phone signal, let alone an internet connection. And so we've actually spent the last 5 years moving our program into a blended learning environment. And when this happened, we actually had to scale back and change everything from online to make it possible so that students could learn offline. And we found that email was the best low-tech solution, because the nice thing about email is that it comes to you. And so for our students who had to walk for 20 minutes to get a cell phone connection, they would walk, connect to the internet, and all of their content for the week would just download onto their computers. We forget that email is one of those technologies that doesn't break. Email just works. And it's one of the most stable internet technologies that exists. But we don't think of email as being online and blended. And I think we need to be very careful about things like Zoom videos that require students to be online at specific times for specific durations, because that it is not equitable access. And if we had taken that option in our department, we would have seen 30% of our students just completely left behind. So I think it's really important to recognize that students don't have equal access. And again, like I was saying, every decision that you make has a political consequence. So I think it's really important that we think very carefully about the technologies that we use for our students.
That's a great perspective. Thank you, Michael. Nihad, you had something as well.
This is actually just a short comment now. I agree with Michael, and that's why we actually made sure that we record all the meetings and we record all the lectures. So whether you use Microsoft Teams or Zoom, it's recorded, it's there. You can even put it in USB and give it to the student who are in rural areas and far away. But I think this issue needs to be solved in a way, like our countries, they have to think of expanding this network and more bands for the internet. It will remain a challenge definitely in low-income countries, but I think it will affect where we are planning for our education systems to move on.
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes it's not a question of thinking forwards, but it's more a question of thinking backwards again as to when we didn't have internet and how, or when we had less technology and how we could cope with that again now. So just in the last few minutes, there's a question here about quality. I've actually lost the question, but the question was around, do we need to consider new quality assurance kind of strategies now that we're moving into a more digital teaching scenario? For example, digital ethics online. Does anyone have any thoughts around the kind of quality and ethics of using digital platforms and technologies? Michael, you must have some thoughts on this.
I'm happy to go ahead. Yes, absolutely. I mentioned it briefly in my talk. We can try and protect our students from the open internet, but the fact is, once they graduate, they're going to be talking about their patients in online spaces, and we need to teach them ways to do that appropriately. So, what are the conditions under which it is appropriate to have a public conversation about one of your patients? How do we make sure that we are keeping that information obfuscated, so that, or personally identifiable information obfuscated, so that students can make use of these learning opportunities, but at the same time protecting patient confidentiality. So I absolutely think that we need an ethics of online engagement. If you look at the General Medical Council in the UK, they've many years ago published guidelines for the UK-based physicians to use social media ethically, and I think no offense, but as usual, physiotherapy is 15 years behind the doctors. We have yet to come up with any kind of ethical framework for using social media as part of our clinical practice. So I absolutely think that needs to be something that is driven either from the grassroots, or it needs to come from an organization like WCPT. And then in terms of quality assurance around online education, absolutely, we have to rethink how we assess, and we need to look at the reliability and validity of the assessment practices that we currently use. And I think if we were going to be honest, we would realize that our assessments are probably not valid, nor are they reliable. And so taking a critical perspective on our assessment practices as we transition into this new environment, I think would be quite useful. As you can see, I do have an opinion on these things, and I recognize that not everyone is going to agree with me. So I just want to be clear, it's just my opinion.
All opinions are valid. And Nihad, Marco, did you have anything to add to that final question?
Yes, in some of my courses, I show patient videos, and when we do the videotaping, before actually we do any videotaping, we obtain the patient's consent. and let them know the purpose of, and the use of these videos. And we tell the students not to take any images of the videos and distribute them. And that's very important. And within our online system, we have a specific setting, and so that the students cannot download the videos, but still, they could take images of the videos on the screen. So before we show them the videos, we tell the students not to take any images. And I think this is, part of the training as well.
Great, thank you, Marco, sorry. Nihad, anything finally from you?
Yeah, just two last thoughts now, listening to the panelists. Like, one is really like, we need to teach our students how to use the information online, whether information coming from us or different resources. And here it comes all these clinical reasoning skills and evidence-based practice, and which resources to trust and how to read these resources and how to consume the information. And the other thought I have, that as an educator, we need to go back and revisit our syllabi, structure, competencies. I even can see some of the intended learning outcomes being changing. So we need to start thinking of this digital media and what are the thoughts, ethics, principles that we need our students to get used to. It's as the great presentation of Michael said, we are reshaping the education. So simply we have to do it carefully, and we have to stop and reflect on our experience, so on.
Thank you so much, Nihad, and thank you, Marco and Michael. You've certainly all given me some things to think about as we go forwards. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to hand back to Djenana to close down the webinar today.
Thank you all for wonderful presentations and wonderful insights and experiences. And just to add to the final thoughts on ethics and research and use of technology, and technology is not neutral, and we definitely do need more guidance. And the work has been started in not only in physiotherapy. The similar discussions are happening in other disciplines, and people are calling for ethical principles for use of technology in education. So really thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you to our speakers. If we haven't answered your question, we will try to post it, summarize the questions that are left and post them in a Facebook group. And as Michael suggested, Facebook is not neutral, and we do know that we also do not reach some of you who are not on Facebook, but we are trying to find the spaces that we can share and engage with the community of educators. So if you're not in a part of the group and you are a Facebook user, please join us and join the World Physiotherapy Network for PT educators. We will post the recordings of this webinar on the World Physiotherapy COVID-19 Information Hub under Education-Based Resources, where you can find recordings of all previous webinars. This is the last webinar this year in the 2020 series. We will be starting again in early January. So please keep your eye on the website for the information about the upcoming webinar that will be on January 11th at the same time as this one, 2:00 p.m. GMT. And the focus will be on mental health, how to foster mental health of educators and students during the pandemic. So stay well, and hope to see you all next year. Bye-bye.